And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Amplifying F# session. So for this week, we have this is a milestone for us. We reached out the 50th session in Amplifying F#. It's been a long journey. You didn't know if we will make it to session 10. But yeah, thank you very much for being with us, from all this journey. We are an initiative that tries to make a difference in the F# ecosystem by, aiming to inspire developers to chime in and help F# along the way. You can help by, just amplifying your project, your library, or by, letting us know if you have a contribution to any open source F# related project that you want to finish or you would like to fix. And then we are here to, to take you from the beginning to the end and help you figure out the issue, not likely to solve your issue, but, give you the tools so you can actually do it yourself without waiting for, someone else to do it for you. And so for this week, we have a really special guest. And personally, I think one of the reasons that I am a F# developer today is because of all the amazing content that Scott has created over the years. Not only F# for fun and profit, his books, the first time I heard about functional programming was when a colleague of mine introduced me to railway-oriented programming, and I didn't know what that was. So I went to F# for fun and profit and actually started to learning from there. Has been a journey, and yeah, I am really excited to introduce to you Scott, which is a expert in the software industry, renowned for his talks and proficiency with functional programming, domain modeling, and and for all the different articles, books that he puts out there. So yeah. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Scott, where he's going to share us his F# journey with us. Thank you, Scott.
Great, thanks so much for having me. So let me share my screen. Oh, so there we go. Let me share my screen. There we go. Okay. Right. Yes. So thank you for having me. It's a real honor, actually. I'm so glad that the F# community is, amplifying F# and other things. It's really nice, that these things are going and there's enough interest. It's fantastic. It's a small community, but it's a fun community. I think that's one of the. It's some communities are very kind of toxic and stuff. And one of the things I love about F# is the community is really friendly and really helpful. And so thank you guys for organizing this thing, and thank you for having me on. Okay, so yeah, I thought this is not really F# in terms of technical things you can do with F#. This is more just like how I got into F# and some of the things that I think are relevant, not even F# specific, just things relevant about developing as a programmer and in terms of my life, because I am quite old now and a lot of you are probably quite young, and it's kind of interesting to see how you'll develop. So let's start off with the prehistory. So I always like to show this slide. This is me a long time ago when I was a kid. There's me in the corner, and can everyone see my screen all right? Yeah, good. So it's a bit of a silly joke, but I have been around a long time. And I'm old enough that when I did a math degree, that's what I did at university. I did a math degree, mathematics, and there was no computer science at that point. I mean, there were computer scientists in academia, but in terms of undergraduate, computer science didn't exist. In fact, we didn't even have a computer. I think we had a mini, one of the departments had a mini computer, like the physics department maybe, but the mathematicians did not like computers, and they sneered at computers. So it's like, as a mathematician, it's like, oh, no, computers are terrible things, therefore for people who can't do math properly. So I didn't start programming until I was in my 20s, so my late 20s. So when I graduated from university, I did all sorts of jobs. I was a carpenter, and I did all sorts of random jobs like one does when you're young, And I didn't have a career path. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't really want to teach math at a high school or anything like that. I wasn't interested. So I was kind of, wandering around, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my life? And then my dad got a K Pro. So if you're wondering what a K Pro is, this is a K Pro. This is the first computer I used. It was a portable computer. It means you could actually lift it up because it was, it was like a suitcase, but it was heavy, but you could actually move it around. It was incredible because unlike these, mainframes or a mini computer, which took up a room, you could actually carry it. Luggable, they call them luggables, because they weren't really laptops. And it had two floppy drives in it. And you could actually get extra memory. It didn't have any hard drive, of course, but you could actually buy a 5 MB hard drive for a couple of hundred, maybe $1,000, right? So that was, a good buy. If you're a serious user, you might want to have a couple of megabytes of hard drive. Otherwise, you're stuck with these floppies. So that's how we did stuff then. So the thing is, I learned to program, right? How do you learn to program when there's no internet, there's no Stack Overflow? How do you even, where do you even start? I've just got this computer, and how do I learn to program? Because it was fun. Well, it turns out there are books and there are magazines and there are in-person user groups where you actually go to a room and you talk to other programmers face to face in person. And they had stores where you could buy software. I mean, they had a bookshop that sold nothing but technical books, and they had most bookshops had technical books, and you could buy. They had a chain bookstore that would sell shrink wrap software in boxes, right? Just like you'd buy laundry detergent or something, or video. Actually, the nearest things like video games. Probably remember some of the video game stores, or there and a Blockbuster where you'd rent videos, right? Well, you had software, same thing. And you could also do mail order. Of course, you couldn't download stuff on the internet, but you could send away with a check. You write your check and you send it off, and they send you back something. That's how stuff was done. However, it was a lot of fun. These are my favorite computer magazines. You'd subscribe to a magazine rather than reading a blog. And there was a famous one on Smalltalk, Byte magazine, and Computer Language magazine was actually my favorite one, and it just had stories about computer languages, and I loved computer languages. And by the way, both of these are available on the archive, Wayback Machine at archive.org, and I put the links in here, and I can make this slide available maybe so I'll post it on Twitter or something. You guys can read it later, and you can click on the links, and you can actually see. I think this is the Byte magazine here, the Smalltalk. And here's all the ads. It's got everything in it. Here's the ads. You can get 65K of memory for only $299. And so this is how I used to learn things back in the day. Here's a real in-person store and accounting. 16K for $149. It's a real bargain. So you'd be scouring all this stuff, and that's how we learn things. And here's the thing is that everything was very expensive. This is pre-Linux. This is pre-open source. I mean, there was a little bit of open source, but open source didn't really take off until you had personal computers that were cheap. So you'd buy, if you wanted to buy a C compiler, it would cost you, a Lattice one was very good. That was $500 normally. And notice that there's, for example, Logitech, the mouse people, they had a Modular 2 compiler. And then there's Turbo Pascal, which I will talk about in a second. That was fantastic. So yeah, here we go. And then if you want a printer, so it just be a daisy wheel, a dot matrix printer would be $1,800. So everything was really expensive. So you really, because you were spending so much money, you really wanted to get the most out of something. So in a funny sort of way, when something's disposable, you don't really pay attention to it, like disposable fashion but if you're spending a lot of money on something, I would memorize. If I bought a piece of software, I'd literally memorize the entire manual because I paid all this money. I really want to get my money's worth. So I think that's a different kind of thing. You really focused on getting stuff done. And this is the first language I used was called DBase 2, which was a database program. And the ads in those days were very funny. I mean, this is kind of, a lot of these people are ex-hippies. And so they had kind of funny ads and they had funny writing, and you can tell from the typeface that this is definitely 80s, you know. So they have jokes and stuff and memes and stuff, even, you know, back in the 80s. So it was a different time. But again, this had 65,000 records. That's how big it could store, which is pretty bad, which is good for a floppy disk. And it only cost $700. So this is the shop you bought it from, Egghead Software. I used to go there all the time. And you would buy MS-DOS. If you want the latest version of MS-DOS, of course, it's pre-Windows. So you had to get, is this pre-Windows? Yes, I think it is. Oh, Windows maybe just had come out. It's hard to say the dates, but anyway, yeah, this was the how you bought stuff. And of course, everything came on floppies, right? We didn't have a CD. And these floppies were much better than the big floppies the other had before, the 5¼ floppies, the 3½ floppies, and then you had CDs, and CDs were amazing because you could put like, ooh, a lot of stuff on a CD. But of course, you know, it's all changed. People's never even used a floppy, I imagine, most of you. Machines don't have floppy drives, anything, right? So now this is the program that changed my life. This was Turbo Pascal, and it was very cheap and it was very fast because normally you'd like wait ages for a compiler to work. It was super fast, instant. Everything was done in memory. It really changed my life because this got me my first proper job as a pro. I learned Turbo Pascal. I could afford it because it was $50. And I learned, again, I memorized the manual and I memorized the libraries and I memorized all the stuff. And I got my first job as a programmer. So I learned DBase 2. And the thing is, even with all these limitations, I actually learned a lot of programming languages. I learned DBase 2, I learned Turbo Pascal. I got my first job using Microsoft Pascal. I learned Turbo Prolog. I learned Turbo Module 2. I got Smalltalk, which I love, and I will tell you about in a minute. I could also buy disks with all these weird programming languages on them, mostly kind of academic ones like Perl and Icon and Awk and Scheme. And I played with all these. So I learned a little bit of Scheme, I learned a little bit of Awk, I learned a bit of Perl and Icon, all this stuff. One of them was Miranda, which is the first pure programming language. And it was the kind of predecessor of Haskell. I really wanted to learn it, but the license was too expensive. And the guy who wrote it, who was an academic, he was trying to sell it and I couldn't afford it. So I never learned functional programming then. I really wanted to, but I couldn't. And I never learned C. I hate C. And I hated C++. I hate C. I hate all the C languages. I never liked them. So that's where I came from. So it's a very exciting time. Everything was happening. The personal computer was taking off. All these exciting books were coming out. You know, the whole thing of structured programming, the Gang of Four book was coming out. Richard Gabriel's book came out, and that's where he had the Worse is Better essay, if you haven't read that. And then the whole user interface came out with Don Norman and Alan Cooper. So it was just a very good time. And then things like Uppsala, you started having non-academic programming conferences. Right. Previously, all the programming conferences were all for professors, and this became something that anyone could go to. Just a random person could actually go to these conferences and hang out with these people. So that was fun. And so I got into Smalltalk. I got some jobs as a Smalltalker, and I started teaching Smalltalk to people. And I wrote some Smalltalk books, which were self-published. They were photocopied. You know, they weren't published with a thing, but they were. You know, I would sell them by mail order. And I organized a Smalltalk conference. And that was in 1993. So that's how long. In those days, Smalltalk was really big. It was the trendy thing, and all the banks were using it, and the insurance companies were using it, and so it was very good. I got a lot of work out of using Smalltalk. And then everything crashed down. The things got really bad, and the reason they got really bad was Java and JavaScript. So I'll tell you that in a minute. But at the time, it was and all sorts of things were happening. So the takeaway from this stage of my life is that you're really important to expose yourself to lots of different languages. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, they know Java, they know JavaScript, they know C#, whatever. Learn as many languages as you can. It's really good for you to expose yourself. And I have a whole talk, 4 languages and 40 years ago, which is all about this. And these are languages, these are languages done in the 70s and 80s. So there's no excuse. It's not like you need modern technology. All this cool stuff was done, you know, before the internet. And the other thing I learned when I was learning all these different languages, you don't fight the language. Like if you're an expert in Java or object-oriented programming, don't try and fit object-oriented programming into, you know, functional programming or logic programming or vice versa. You know, figure out what the language is like to be, the grain of the language, like, and follow that grain. Don't fight it, because it's very frustrating. I see people getting very frustrated when they're learning F sharp or something, and they're trying to do OO stuff, and they're trying to do, or they come from Python and they're used to dynamic typing, and it's like, why do I have to put types everywhere? All this stuff. They get frustrated because they're imposing their existing way of thinking onto a new paradigm, and it's like, you can't learn that way. You have to forget everything you know. Like, and I that's one of the things I learned. So when I came to F sharp, I deliberately said I need to forget everything I know about OO and Smalltalk and all this stuff, and come at its own terms. And that was good. I think that helped me learn F sharp better. It was still very hard though. So, and also I learned a little about everything. I learned about databases. I was just reading all these books. And again, without the internet, I mean, one of the problems with the internet is you spend all day on social media, and I'm flicking through Twitter or Instagram or whatever, right? Didn't have that. So if I wanted to entertain myself, I would read a book. So I'd have these big, heavy programming books, and I'd read a whole book about databases, or a whole book about, user interface design or something. And, that's how I learned stuff. But there's nothing to distract you. So that in a way, it was quite good that way. Right, now, the boring years. So for a long time, life was pretty boring. And the reason was, I think the internet actually made things boring. We started having dancing monkeys, and a lot of money started coming into programming, and it was all about startups and dot-coms and how can we make money as fast as possible. And it stopped being, I love software design, and I love thinking and thinking about stuff. And there was no room for that. You had to get stuff out the door as fast as you could, and it didn't matter if it was any good or not. You just get it out the door. And it's still going. There's a lot of that is still going on, unfortunately. So I was part of the first dot-com bubble where companies were worth millions of dollars, and then they all went to nothing. So that was, it was expected, actually. I was expecting it to happen, because if you know history of technology, you always get a bubble. So JavaScript took over, Java took over. It was really boring. We got this kind of monoculture where that's the only thing people knew. All these programming books on design kind of stopped right up. There was nothing interesting happening, in my opinion, anyway. There's not a lot of happening. And if you read Dilbert back in the day, the #1 comic strip was Dilbert, and it was all about enterprise programmers, and that was very accurate. It was just like that. So really boring. And I was doing lots of contracts, Python, Visual Basic, and then I started getting to .NET, and I was a DBA for a while, so I learned a lot of stuff. So I actually learned that programming is more than technical. I did learn some things. I learned that it's not all about technology and programming. It's about listening to people. And I got into domain-driven design. And, in a contracting world, it's all about what can you deliver to somebody. It's about adding value, right? It's not about the best technology. And sometimes the technically best technology is not what people want. So I had to get rid of my ego. And rather than say, well, my way is the best way, you learn to adapt your style to this. And I actually have a whole tweet about this on doing Python. I did a Python contract recently. I'm happy to do any jobs that will pay me. So I did a Python contract, and I have a whole tweet on why it's like being a good session musician, right? So if you're a session musician and you work in a music studio or something, you'll come in to do, a country and western song, or a heavy metal song, or a pop song, or a rap song, whatever. If you're a good musician, you adapt your style to the song that you're playing. If you don't play some sort of shredding metal riff when you're playing country music, and vice versa, you don't play steel guitar, it's just in a rap song, or maybe you do, but the idea, you deliberately suppress your ego. You try and what's the best thing for the situation, and that's something I learned during my contracting years. And I recommend that you turn off your ego and do adapt your style. So, and then finally, I discovered F sharp. By the way, any questions? If I'm happy to stop now. If just before I get into the F sharp thing, any questions on the beginning? Yeah.
Yeah, I have one, which is I imagine, but based on your experience, like it was in those years, you have a more meaningful shelf of books where you can actually buy books and you read them and you count them as that you read it.
That's
because
right.
nowadays I have 10, 15 books, and I don't think I have maybe finished two of them.
Right.
And you know, I think that's a really awesome observation that
Yeah. I
social
mean,
media really just distracted us a little bit from the actual goal of reading books.
yeah, me too. I mean, I used to read books. I don't read books anymore either because, I've got social. I mean, I spend a lot of time reading on the internet. I read blogs and I read the newspapers and I read, Twitter and stuff. But in terms of actually sitting down with a book and reading it cover to cover, yeah, I've stopped doing that, which is bad. I mean, I really would like to do that because I do think there's something, it's a different kind of knowledge when you're kind of skimming and you're picking things here and picking, you're getting a superficial knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you spend all your time reading Stack Overflow, I mean, Stack Overflow is sort of dead now too, but back in the day, people would read Stack Overflow and you'd spend all day, but it's not the same thing as reading a book which is specifically designed to teach you something on a particular topic.
Yeah, and the second question I had is like, when you say that you order books and from for delivery and all that stuff, I guess the time that you had to spend to learn something, it was more, it was a longer time, longer waiting time. That you receive the book, you read the book, you can apply what you have learned, and then
Right.
apply for jobs and all that stuff. So I
Yeah.
guess the information was not as available as it is now. So how do you think that helped you to actually absorb the knowledge and get more of what you were trying to learn?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. It's harder. Definitely, things were slower. I mean, the whole classic thing. I mean, here's a good example. The whole agile movement was also taking off in the 90s, and before, when I worked on a project, it would not be uncommon to have 6 months between deliveries of a piece of software.
Wow.
If you're really fast, maybe every month, maybe really every couple of weeks, if you're really, really, really fast, and then with the internet, you could start having, the whole thing of having XP, you might have a delivery once a week. And then you had continuous delivery, like you deliver, you put something up, and then you had source control. Yeah, back in the day, I wasn't using source control either. So, everything would just live on folders on your drive, and the whole thing of using source control. And then GitHub came along, um, and having a distributed source control. It was, yeah, I mean, a lot of I think when I said that this was a boring period of time, it was boring in terms of programming languages were boring, but the programming processes, there was a lot happening, like the rise of agile, the rise of source control, and all the things on that kind of stuff. There was a lot going on that way, absolutely. But in terms of, you see, I'm not that interested in the process of I mean, I'm more interested in the ideas. So that stuff didn't that interest me that much. And the whole internet, making things, the whole client server JavaScript stuff, that never interested me either. So, but I mean, for other people, it's a very exciting time. The internet was an exciting time for a lot of people. For me, it was all about Java and JavaScript. It was really boring. So,
Thank you. Jack has a question.
yes.
Jack.
Yeah, and maybe you're gonna get to it here in a second. But what was like as you're going through this? Because I'm assuming I'm actually watching *Halt and Catch Fire* right now. If anybody hasn't seen that show,
Yes,
about
yes. I
it's so
haven't.
funny you're talking about this, and I'm going. I literally was watching it yesterday, and I'm like, this is crazy. This is exactly what. So if you haven't seen that show, but my
It's on my,
question.
yeah,
Oh, go
it's
ahead. I'm
on my,
sorry.
I just want to say it's on my list of shows. I hear a lot of things, and
You have to watch it.
it sounds like I was there at the time. It sounded just like when I was programming then. So yes, absolutely. Sorry, go on. Your question. Yes.
You gotta watch it, Scott. You'd love it. But my
Yeah,
question
yeah.
was, so as all these programming languages are being developed and stuff, I'm assuming object-oriented programming, that's kind of the thing that's coming
Yes.
along. Was there any mention even before 2008 of like like was because I mean I feel like functional programming recently has kind of come onto the scene pretty strong,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty young, so I just have gotten into programming like 5 6 years ago. So I'm curious, was functional programming coming along? Like, what were you aware of it even up until 2008?
Well, I was aware of it because I knew about the kind of slightly academic side of things like Miranda and Haskell, but no, everybody was talking about. Now, what's interesting is I was there before object-oriented because I was doing Smalltalk before object-oriented programming was trendy. So when Java came along, and the OO stuff was considered very weird, just like functional programming is now. OO was considered really weird. Um, and everyone, all the traditional programmers hated it. They said this newfangled stuff is terrible. But it kind of took off. There was Objective-C, and then after that there was C++, and then Smalltalk really took off for a while, and then Java came, and Java, they had a massive marketing campaign. They were giving away. Remember how I said how compilers were expensive? It cost $500 to buy a compiler. Sun was giving these away. They were giving away Java compilers. They were giving away the books. They were giving away thousands, hundreds of thousands of stuff. That instantly, it was actually the marketing campaign of Java that really made it take off. And that became, Java was, quote, object-oriented. Now, as a small talker, I hated it. It wasn't object-oriented. It was a mishmash. It wasn't really object-oriented in my point of view. It was a fake OO. But that's what OO became. And at that point, OO became very trendy. And all the people like, how do we do OO? And then, there was OO, everything was OO. They started having object-oriented COBOL, right? Object-oriented Fortran, everything was like, OO was the trendy thing. So, it wasn't until the mid-90s that object-oriented really kind of took off. But yeah, functional programmers nowhere. And funny enough, Smalltalk was more functional programming than Java was, because a lot of the stuff I learned from when I started in F#, things like map, or the way of handling collections with map and filter and all this stuff, that was in Smalltalk already had that. You passed in, you didn't call it a lambda, but you passed in a piece of code against the collection because it was encapsulated. You weren't allowed to loop through a collection. You had to pass in a function, or a lambda, or Smalltalk called them blocks. But it was the same thing. You passed in something to execute against each element of the collection. So I already knew that stuff from Smalltalk. So when that stuff I thought was great. And same thing when Link came out in C#. It's like I already understood exactly how linked worked because it was kind of a copy of how Smalltalk did it. So, but yeah, I was unusual that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I was unusual that way. I think most people had no idea, and they weren't curious. That was the thing. The whole people learning 20 different languages, that went out the window. That's what made me sad, is that people stopped being curious about this. Anyway, is that so? Right? Yeah.
That was awesome. Yeah. No, and
Okay.
it's just because like I just always think that like I guess it was just imperative before then. You were just kind of doing things procedurally, and
Yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah. Everything was. I mean, procedures were a great improvement over assembly. Put it this way: in the 80s, a lot of stuff was written assembly. I mean, a lot of the stuff on the microcomputers was assembly based. So like the Lotus 123 and I don't think Microsoft Word was written in C, but a lot of the early programs were all written in assembly. So
Wow.
that was because it was the only thing that was fast enough. I mean, even, that was the way to get performance. When you had 64K of memory and you had an 8-bit chip, with 8K of memory on board the chip or something, it's like, yeah, it's all about every single cycle was important. So yeah, we've lost that. I mean, it's good in a way that we don't have to worry. But again, I never cared about performance that way. But I mean, it's nice that we don't have to care about performance. But it's also we have lost something, and it's nice to see the retro people getting really into, high perform. Retro computing is kind of fun. Or they're learning how to do fitting things
It's very
between the
hipster.
scan lines. Yeah, it's kind of fun, but it's kind of irrelevant, but it's kind of fun though. I can
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. Yeah. Right. Okay. So F#. So I was getting bored. As I said, spent 15 years doing kind of contract programming. It was really boring, and it was all C# and Visual Basic. It was fine, but and then I was looking for something, and I wanted to learn functional programming. Lisp was the big one, but I didn't really want to learn this. I already knew Smalltalk. OCaml, Haskell was not really available because they were kind of academic. Again, they were very academic at the time. And then I came across Thomas's book here, Real World Functional Programming with examples in F# and C#, which very good. And then the most thing that really triggered me was this talk by Luca Bolognese, which was done in 2008. And I've got a link here for the YouTube video. If you just Google his name on YouTube, you'll find the video. The video is very low res because it was back in the day, but it was like mind blowing. I've never seen anything like that in terms of a language. So it's like, I need to learn how to do this. What is this cool thing? And I wanted to learn functional programming, but I was in the Microsoft world, right? So I knew about Microsoft Research. So I downloaded F# from Microsoft Research. This is before it was when it was still a research project. And I started reading these things called weblogs. That's what they were called, weblogs. And there were a bunch of people, and they were really important to me because I kind of devoured everything they had written. And they're still available on the Wayback Machine. If you want to, again, I'll put links here to see. So this was the F-sharp. This isn't the Wayback Machine. This is the download page from 2008. And yeah, it was notice from Microsoft Research. It's not from Microsoft. And you have to download it as a zip file and install it. And it was, you know, what's amazing actually is that F-sharp has not changed that much. There was a couple of things in the next version, but what's really cool about, one of the things I love about F-sharp is it doesn't change a lot. You know, that code you've written from 15 years ago is still readable. Now the code for C# is the exact opposite. A lot of the techniques from, you know, C# then would be considered really bad techniques in modern C#, and you know, the whole async stuff has changed. Many of the collection classes have changed, but F# has actually been really stable. Like a couple of new features, but it's actually amazing. Don Simons done an absolutely fantastic job of managing the language development. I really cannot praise him high enough for you know, staying on top of all this stuff. So anyway, so I downloaded it and I installed it. There's an example of one of the blogs. I think this is Brian McNamara. It was on Windows Live. There you go. It was Hotmail. That was when Hotmail was big. And again, a lot of the people, I mean, this is a very good blog, but I had trouble reading this stuff because a lot of this stuff was very academic, and a lot of the people involved had computer science degrees or they had an academic background. And I was like, why is this useful? You know, why? I've got the continuation monad and I've got it's like, okay, it's interesting, but why is this useful? So I was always worried about when I read these blogs. And then finally, F# did ship as part of 2010 on April 5th, April 12th, maybe, which I have F# Day. I call it F# Day because it's when F# actually, the first functional programming language to be made mainstream, in my view, is literally part of Visual Studio. So there's the link to the thing. Again, this is I have the link to this on the Wayback Machine. So that was impressive. 2010, a functional programming language being shipped with Visual Studio. That was very unusual because this is still the height of OO programming. So that was a big risk for Microsoft. And I'm disappointed that Microsoft never really ran with this, you know. They could have done better. So it was part of Visual Studio, but they never really pushed it. They just, you know, well, we know how that goes. Oh, now, so I was trying to learn F# and I had a hard time because I already know all these programming languages. How hard can it be, right? I know Python and I know C# and I know Prolog and I know Smalltalk and I know all these things. How hard can it be? Well, it turns out it was pretty hard because things like immutability, I had a really hard time with that, and the things like partial application and using white space. I didn't have a problem with white space because I already knew Python, but using white space for the parameters and union types and all this stuff, it was like a lot of new things, and I really had a hard time. It really surprised me how hard it was. So I decided to document what I was learning, and I'd already done this as Smalltalk. I'd written Smalltalk books, and I'd trained people in Smalltalk, and I realized that one of the best ways to help yourself learn is to explain it to other people. So I said, I'm going to get on the weblog bandwagon, and I registered fsharp@funandprofit.com. So that was my beginning. So my takeaway for this part of thing is, like, if you're learning something, start a blog, or nowadays a YouTube channel, or even more nowadays for the young kids is TikTok or whatever it is. But, you know, get your stuff out there. It's really good to force yourself to explain to other people. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's also really good practice for writing and presenting anything in a business. You always, you know, if you can write and present things inside a company, you're going to get promoted. It's just that, it's that simple. And it's just very good for your career to sort of differentiate yourself. So, okay, any more questions before I turn out to be when I get into F#?
No,
Yeah.
not so far.
Okay, good. All right. So now I got my blog. This is 2012, and it was a very good decision to start my blog. I had a lot of fun writing it. Every weekend I'd come up from work and I'd start writing stuff. And I had a very specific goal not to be academic, because I was reading all these Haskell blogs, and I was reading even the F# blogs had this kind of slightly academic thing, and it was all about here's the theoretical stuff. But it's like, as a programmer, who's done very practical things as business applications, why, is it actually useful? So a lot of the people had these they used Monads, and they had this kind of math end of it. They're always trying to see the mathematical basis for functional programming. And I said, okay, no math, no Monads, no nothing. That was my policy in my blog. And it had to be something you could explain, simply to a regular programmer and not scare them off. So that was my philosophy. And I think it worked out very well, right? The blog got really popular. I was getting 1,000, 2,000 visits a day at one point, I think. It's gone. I haven't updated it for years, so my fault. But I mean, at one point it was super popular, and I was doing a C# full time and coming home and blogging every weekend. So I was very consistent. So that's my tip for blogging, is definitely be consistent, right? To have something out every week. Be funny and stir the pot. Like, try and not necessarily clickbait. I don't like clickbait for the sake of it, but try and say something slightly controversial, or to get people to think, because that creates engagement in a good way, not in a clickbaity way, but just like say something that challenges people to think about something differently. So that's the kind of thing I did in my blog, as well as having the F# stuff. That's the kind of stuff. So for example, I had this post called 10 Reasons Not to Use a Statically Typed Programming Language, which I thought was very funny, but a lot of my friends said, oh, no, you can't be, it's not funny that you're insulting people and stuff. I wasn't insulting anybody. I just thought it was funny because that's my sense of humor. So if you haven't read that, I've got again, you can look at this on my website, you can look that up. And the comments were hilarious. I mean, I have to say, it wasn't really a troll, but I loved getting these crazy comments from people, because I would say I just went completely over the top with the anti-functional programming stuff, and people fell for it. It was funny. It was very funny. Anyway, so yeah, like most programmers, I'm naturally conservative and I dislike learning new things. That's why I picked a career in IT. That was the first sentence in the post. And ironically, that is sort of true. I was frustrated because I was dealing with people who didn't want to learn functional programming. And why didn't they want to learn? It's like, because I already know everything I need to know and I don't want to learn anything new. So I put that, I just made it, exaggerated that and put it in there, and people got really upset by that. The more lines of code I write, the more productive I feel. Everything I said in there was based on actually talking to real people when they were saying, why didn't they want to learn functional programming? Why didn't they want to learn, anything other than Java and JavaScript? So I thought that was hilarious. I mean, I'm not really a troll, but I do like winding people up a little bit sometimes. So yeah, I thought I was entertained. I enjoyed entertaining people, and also it was entertaining for other people who were in on the joke, So right, and then the next thing happened is I started doing presenting, and I did my very first talk in 2012, NDC London, and there was a guy called Brian Hunter, and I have to thank him for picking me to be one of the presenters when I had zero background, no knowledge, and I had no history of presenting, and he didn't know who I was, and I just submitted a proposal, and he picked me, and there we go. That's changed my life. So thank you, Brian. And of course, what did I talk about? I talked about modeling with F# types. It wasn't called domain-driven. It wasn't called domain modeling main function. It was called modeling with F# or something. Data design with F# types. I can't remember. Anyway. So it's not video. It wasn't ever videoed because it was in a tiny, small room. But I did get to meet Don Syme and Matthias and Thomas and a bunch of other F-sharpers in person. And so that was nice. I actually, that was fun. So that was my beginning of my F# career. That was just only 12 years ago now. Not that long ago, really, in the big scheme of things. So yeah, I got sucked into the F# community. And so the takeaway from this part is that the F# community is fantastic. If you are, and this is to do with anything, not even programming, but like if you're learning to knit, or you're learning to, ride a bike or something, it's just like, find a nice community and stay away from the toxic people run away from. There's a lot of toxic stuff in the functional programming. There was there was a massive Scala toxic thing in Scala. There was a massive toxic thing in Haskell. And F sharp people never really had that. That was really good. And it's actually kind of fun in a small, like one of the people say, why F sharp? Because it's like tiny. It's like, it's fun. It's because you can know, a small pond is fun. You can meet everybody. You can know everybody personally. It's more fun than being in a big pond with a whole bunch of people who are strangers. So yeah, any questions about that? Any comments about, I mean, yeah.
So we have a comment on YouTube that basically kind of highlight that it says that it's nice to know that even you had experience learning F sharp. That Raymond says that he learned F sharp in a really pretty academic way, very theory heavy talks and university, I guess. And now he's having fun doing Haskelling exercising. So yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I mean, these languages are now not mainstream, but they're available in places like Exorcism, and there's, Stack Overflow has sections on functional programming, and I mean, like I said, they're not really mainstream, but they are definitely a common. And also all the functional programming stuff have now soaked into C# and Java and Python, and not much Python, but Ruby, and everyone is, functional programming is the new trendy thing. But they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing they did with OO, and like the real OO is Smalltalk and Java is fake OO. And it's the same thing with functional programming. It's like C# is not functional, but I'm sorry, it's just not when because everything's unless you have immutability and unless you have composition of things and stuff, it's like object-oriented COBOL, it's like putting something. So I know people like it, but I'm still, if I'm going to do a functional programming, I'm going to pick. Now I like C#, but I wouldn't use it for functional programming. I like, pick a language is what it's good at. So
yeah,
yeah.
So talking about C# and functional programming, I remember seeing a tweet from you maybe a couple of months ago where you had a slide called C# Lite or something like that.
Yes, I need to put them.
I learned a lot from that because some of the ideas that you actually predicted the future, or you or you saw the trend, or being with your experience, you saw kind of where the design could lead to an object-oriented programming using functional features. So yeah.
Yeah, it's on SlideShare. There we go.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I did, this is because again, I was so fed up of all this stuff. Is like, yeah, if C# again, C# people being very interested in learning new things. So I did this whole slide of, it's all about if you change the you did all these things like primary constructors. I had all this stuff. This is 10, 12 years ago. And of course, a lot of this stuff is coming into C# now. But yeah, it's funny because I was making a joke, but it's now becoming real. So yes, absolutely. Jack had a question, I think.
Yeah. Question. What was the hard? Because like, what's funny is I mean I graduated university like 3.5, 4 years ago, and I came out with no functional programming knowledge. And really, one of my coworkers got me into it at my company when I was at a previous company I worked at. And I remember the way he explained it; it'd always break my brain. And it was only until like I'm serious, like he would try to explain what a monad was,
Right.
and and looking back on it, it was so funny because like I realize now that like how I understand it all now, but like looking back, it was such a dramatic shift. I'm curious, what concepts were the hardest for you to pick up at first? Like, for example, mine was like the higher order functions of like not iterating. Actually, the idea of immutability broke my brain.
Right.
I didn't understand how you can make a program.
Exactly. I think immutability is the hardest one because how can you do anything
I
if you
know
if you don't assign something to something? It's like I think that was the hardest thing to understand.
Cool.
And that's
Yeah,
why I said this whole thing about following the grain of the language. I mean, I could have started when I was learning F#, I could have said, well, I'll just make everything immutable and program that way. But I knew that would be the wrong way to do it. I knew that I had to follow the natural way of the language, And so even though it was hard, that's what for any language, that's what I recommend anyway. So yeah, it was hard. And the collection stuff, like I say, I already had Smalltalk, already had to think of passing in lambdas into a collection class. So that was all right. Yeah. But that was also another thing for people who are used to doing for loops. it's a completely different way of thinking about. Absolutely. I think that's another hard one for a lot of people.
Do you
Absolutely.
think one way of thinking is harder than because I always think now looking back, I actually think that it's simpler to like map through things than it is to like I actually think that it's a simpler thing to understand. I don't know, like maybe I'm just like indoctrinated at
Yeah,
this point.
I do think so. I think a lot of the OO stuff in one of my talks, I have a whole thing about all these complicated words that programmers use, like monads and monoids and stuff. And then I talk about OO people have polymorphism and encapsulation and inheritance and all this stuff, abstract base class and IOC containers and da da da. Yeah, I think it's just what you're used to. And I think all the stuff that object-oriented people are used to, they're just used to it. And it's not, if you take a child and you try and teach them this, it'd be interesting to see which one they find easier. I don't
Yeah, it
think
really
they'll
would because
find,
I
oh,
actually
yeah,
think that I actually think functional is simpler because
yeah,
you're using less. Like I always think like actually functional programming, there's so much less stuff you need to know. You're just kind
yeah,
of going deeper into the things you have. So
I
you're
think
using your
so.
tool.
Yeah. And you don't need to
Awesome.
know monad. You don't need to know monads. I'm very anti monads,
I
especially
agree.
especially as I know what a monad is because I've got a math degree, and the people who talk about monads actually do not know what a monad is. So it makes me kind of annoyed. At some point I'm going to have a whole talk about what is a monad, but
Yeah, we would
anyway.
love to hear that one. So it's one observation and also about this slide that you have here is like the reason why amplifying a tribe exists is because we are a small community, and something like this in a in a huge community like JavaScript or Java would be really appreciated, or
Right.
would be really it wouldn't serve a purpose.
Right.
So that's definitely 100% agree with that, because the four of us that are amplifying a tribe, I basically individuals that have a common goal, or we all like F#, we all see the amount of potential, and we all see how
Yeah.
much we can help on that. And
I
yeah,
think it's great. I think you guys are great. I think like I say, it's what's nice is people are very passionate in the F# community, and it's nice. It's it's good. I think it's a great community. It really is nice.
definitely.
Of all the programming language, I've been, like I say, I've done lots of languages, and this is like, I think it's my favorite community of all the ones I've ever been in. So that's good. Yeah.
And the last bit is like curiosity is something that really has led myself, I think in my experience would led me to learn F#, to learn functional programming, and I think that's key feature for an individual, or for for that maybe that we are missing at these times. But yeah, curiosity can take you places if you are curious mind.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, good.
We have a couple of comments on YouTube that saying that they love your blog posts, and he recently read the Computation Explosion series, and yeah, it was such a lovely series. So yeah, he's thanking you for that. But yeah,
there's a lot of old stuff. The blog is getting old. I need to, but it's interesting. A lot of the stuff is older. If I was going to do it now, I'd probably rewrite it. But it's interesting that a lot of the posts are like over 10 years old now, and they're still relevant because F# hasn't, the concepts are still there, and F# has still was designed so well that it hasn't needed major changes, So yeah, it's good.
I was gonna a question. So it was so funny because like it's weird talking to you because I've watched so many of your videos online, and like actually the whole reason I got into it was because my coworker. The reason I got into F# was my coworker who was teaching me functional programming. He's like, you gotta watch this domain modeling video by this guy called Scott. And so I think it was some NDC talk or something, but he gives
Right.
it to me. I was curious because I watched that video. Do you think which of your, because I was actually looking here, I didn't realize you had two books. I have been meaning to read Domain Modeling Made Functional forever.
Yeah, I don't
Would
have
you,
I don't have another book. I have the
is it a railway oriented
that's not
programming? Oh, maybe this isn't a book.
that's not a
Ah,
book. It's just a video.
so you only have one book. So I was going to
Yeah.
ask then, which of these should I read first? So actually, I'm
Yeah.
going to just read Domain Modeling because
Yeah.
I've been meaning to do that for a really long time because it isn't the whole book about like how you could look at an entire business use case and model that with types and just
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's basically an expansion of all of my talks. It combines a lot of my talks plus some extra stuff on domain-driven design. But yeah, if you've seen all my talks, but it puts it all together in one kind of big thing, So
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, is it
yeah.
worth it? It's probably, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it
think
looks fascinating.
I think it's worth it because reading a book is different from watching a talk and reading a blog. I mean, I think it's worth it, but yeah, you don't have to.
Oh,
It's up to
Tim
you.
asked here, any plans for a second edition of Domain Modeling book?
Probably not. I don't think it's out of date. I'm going to talk about the book later on, but I don't think it's out of date. I think I can. There's more stuff I could add, but the thing is, there's a limit to how many pages. So they typically have a 300-page maximum, and I'm pretty much at that. So I'd have to cut things out, and I don't want to do it. So I'm planning to write another book on something else, but you know.
Do you
Right.
suggest to read the DDD book first, or
I think the videos are good, but they're very quick. But if you like the video, then the book will go into a lot more detail.
I mean,
So
the original domain-driven design book? You
oh,
suggest
the blue
first?
book.
Yeah.
I would recommend it's quite heavy. I think it's good to have,
Mhm.
but I think you need to read it once you already know a little bit. It's a way to I wouldn't read it as your first domain book, design book. But it's a good book to have if you're into domain-driven design. It's you need to have the book because it has a lot of stuff in it. But I would probably write it differently. If I was going to rewrite it, that book, I would probably write it in a different way. But it's a good thing to have around, just as a reference book. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Right. Okay. So while we're talking about oh yeah, let's talk about public speaking. I would recommend that anyone do public speaking. I'm actually a very introverted person, and I don't really like. I'm very shy. Actually, you might not think so because I do all these public talks, but I'm pretty introvert. I don't really like talking to people, and so public speaking is actually very good for you because I think it first of all, it's good for your career in terms of learning how to speak in public and how to that's a very good skill to have because like I say, to have a successful career, it's not all about how much technical knowledge you have. It's about how you can communicate that and how you can listen to people and how you can explain things and all this stuff. So public speaking is very good for that. Even if you just do when I started public speaking, I actually did it as brown bag lunches in my company that I work for. We have these things where, once a week, everyone just sit around a table, bring a sandwich, whatever, and one person would give a little talk on something, right? I started doing that, and that's my first talking. And so it's very good because it forces you to think. And there's a classic thing: if you can't explain something, you're probably not thinking about it clearly. If you can explain something clearly, you're probably thinking about it clearly. And if you're not thinking about it clearly, you probably can't have a clear explanation. So they go together. So it forces you to think. When I do my talks, it really forces me to think about what I'm saying. So I highly recommend it from that point of view. Right. Okay. Now let's just talk. I know people always want to talk about my kind of greatest hits on the blog posts. So let's start with railway-oriented programming. So I was interested in error handling, and I was reading all this stuff, especially by Haskellers. There's a particular one, Haskell for All is an excellent Haskell blog. And I just couldn't understand what they were doing. I mean, they used monads everywhere, and they had used either. Why do they call it either when it's an error? Like either, it's either this or that. But why are they using a generic type when they could have an error type? Anyway, a lot of this stuff, and it was, again, they have this math envy. It has to be. And so I thought, well, there has to be a better way of explaining this, right? You could make this explain it. And I was like, looking at a toy train set, and I was thinking, well, yeah, it's just like branching on a train. And it's like, well, I could definitely take this idea and try and explain it to people in a more simple way. So there you go. That's the history of railway-oriented programming. This is my post about it in 2013. And I didn't know, I thought it was actually a very silly idea. Is it stupid? I thought, is this a good idea, or is this actually a really stupid post that I made? I really had no idea that whether people would like it or not. It just like, this is, I thought people might hate it actually. So I posted it, and people did like it. Surprise, surprise. But of course, people said, where are the monads? So this is a little conversation I had. And it's like, great article, but where's the monads? It's like, yeah, well, you don't need to know monads for this. It's not a monad. It's about error handling. So some people got really, really upset with me. And they were like, you're depriving people of knowledge by not telling them about monads. And I'm like, if you want a monad tutorial, there's thousands of monad tutorials out there. I'm not depriving anybody. I'm just not talking about it. People really, some people got really, someone actually started arguing with me on Twitter and calling me a terrible person. So, you know, so there you go. And then the next one I did was the talk called Functional Design Patterns. And again, the functional program is very academic, and the whole thing of design in terms of architecture and design, that wasn't really a thing in the functional program. They're very focused on the, you know, the mathematical side of things. Then I'm coming from the design, I'm coming from the Smalltalk side of things. Now, what's interesting, by the way, is all the famous agile people, Kent Beck, Martin Fowler, Robert Martin, various other people, they were all Smalltalkers. They all came from the Smalltalk worlds. So that world was very influential on the whole design and whole agile thing. And so I came from that world too. And I was trying to apply those things to functional programming, and nobody was talking about it. So I was like, well, where's the Gang of Four book? You know, where's the functional version of Gang of Four? Where is all this other stuff? So nobody's doing it. So I thought, well, I'll try and put all the functional patterns I know about in one talk. And that talk was really long. But what came out of this talk was this slide, which got so much hate. And it was if you haven't seen the talk, again, I'll send you the link down here, but it's on YouTube. I put this slide on here, and people hated this slide. I thought it was funny because I was actually making fun of functional programmers. What people didn't realize in this talk, I was making fun of functional programmers who were saying everything's a function. I was like, everything's a function. You don't need patterns because everything's a function. So I was making fun of them, but the OO people were so mad at me. This guy said it's an open and shut case of FP bigotry. And someone says, you're seeing a holy war where there's none. And then Robert C. Martin, Uncle Bob, the annoying Uncle Bob, he had a whole post on how this is a terrible, terrible slide. Anyway, it was funny. It was very funny. From that, you see, he's accusing me of being an ivory tower. Literally, people have no sense of humor. They are very bad at getting jokes. That's one thing about some programmers; they're just like useless. So here's the takeaway is people don't have a sense of humor, and sometimes people take things that you do and use it against you. And it's like, don't let that stop you. Okay, there's nothing you can do about that. I actually have a very thin skin. I hate it when people say something mean about me. It's like, oh my God, they hate me. You know, you can read 100 comments, positive comments, and one negative comment, and I take the negative comment really seriously. But I've grown a little bit thicker skin, and it's like there are just a lot of people out there. There's nothing you can do that'll make them happy. Just ignore them. Try and be funny, but be nice. But don't let it take you. The thing is, I didn't realize at the time I was actually creating this monster, because now there's railway program for Java and C# and Python, Ruby and Go and TypeScript and COBOL. I'm looking for COBOL. Anyway, it's just crazy, right? It's all this stuff. And a lot of these things, I don't even think you need it. These are dynamic languages. Well, not Go, but they don't fit. This is the kind of thing I talk about. If I was writing Python, I would not use monads. It's not appropriate. So if I'm writing Ruby or Go, it's like the language is not designed for this stuff. Don't do this. So I'm actually anti them using these techniques. I think it's a really bad idea. So it's not the Python has its own natural style, and functional programming is not part of it. Okay, so then I did my book. So I was actually contacted by pragmatic programmers, and they were very good. If you ever want to publish a book, I highly recommend. They're very good to work with. They have a good deal for authors. They give you like 50% of the money, which is nice. And it was unexpectedly successful. I was actually, it gets really good ratings on Amazon, and I was actually very surprised. I thought I was doing it sort of, again, to put it all down paper, and also, again, it's, people think you know what you're talking about. If you write a book, you must be, So I was doing it for my as a promotion for my career, really. I didn't think that it'd actually sell. I just, They didn't think it was going to sell either because it's functional programming. The pragmatic press, they had a lot of Ruby books, and they have the pragmatic programmer stuff. They're not functional people at all. In fact, they've just gradually got into it recently. But anyway, it turned out to be hugely successful. I was actually surprised. I mean, this is what I expected sales to do. I thought, there'd be a peak and then it'll kind of dip off and stuff. But actually, it's kind of been selling at a very constant rate. It's like the sales today are still going on. So, it's not enough to get rich. I'm not getting rich off this book, but it's nice pocket money. Yeah, that's nice. So the tip is, if you ever do write a book, I got some tips for writing a book. Not that's relevant people, but I didn't write anything that was specific to even to F# actually, but it was general principles, and these principles are still valid in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, right? So, for example, the Gang of Four book was published in 1996, right? I think, and Domain Design was published in 2001 or something. These books are 20, 30 years old. They're still relevant. So that's what I want to do. I try to keep my stuff relevant. It's not Visual Basic 5.0 second edition, which is going to be obsolete when the third edition comes out, or the latest JavaScript framework, which is going to be obsolete in 6 months. So I kept it short, I kept it focused, and that I think really helps. It's not one of these massive long books. It's it's short, so that was good. So just to finish up, then, just about the future. Or any more questions about that before I finish up?
We have one that is relevant to domain-driven design question.
Yes.
Robert says that he has learned about domain-driven design through your books and videos. He's asking if do you think he's missing some of the concepts if he's not reading the previous OOP domain-driven books?
No, I don't think so, actually, because I think, funny enough, the whole concept of domain-driven design was to get away from programming first. It's about thinking about the design, think about the people, the language, and making language easy to understand, right? That was the whole concept. And yet the domain-driven design community has created all this complicated language that nobody understands. And that, unfortunately, the books are full of jargon, right? There's lots of words. If you look at the Blue Book and also look at the Vern Vaughan book and stuff, there's hundreds of words you're supposed to know if you're going to be, and if you don't use these words, you're not doing domain-driven design. I think that's really bad. So, I mean, I use the words in my book, but I deliberately try and not use them very much. I try and talk about the concepts, like listening to people, using the same words. Everyone's using the same vocabulary. Everyone's using the same concepts. That's the kind of stuff I talk about. So I think if you take that to heart, then you can do domain-driven design. I don't think you need all those other jargony. People love to like formalize things, and it's like you have to things get rigid, and you have to like do this way, otherwise you're not doing it right. I hate that kind of gatekeeping. So I think if you understand the concept of listening to people and using the same language and the same concepts, that is all you need to know. Really, just one paragraph would explain it. But it's still worth to read the other books, I think, to get other people's opinions on things. Just so don't just. I mean, it's probably good not just to take my opinion. It's probably good to listen to other people's opinions too. So having just said that, but I don't think it's that important. I think my attitude is always about not using jargon, and I think that's why people like my talks and books and stuff, because I try and avoid doing that.
Right. Yeah, we have another, but it's a general question that we will save it for the end.
Okay.
I have a question about your
Yep.
own book. Did you have the whole story up front, or did you kind of go from chapter to chapter and just naturally think of, okay, that's the next logical step that would happen in real world modeling?
Right. Okay. So when I did the proposal for the book, I did actually do an outline. They want you to do an outline of the book, and I wanted to do an outline. So it's like, well, what's the first thing you need to know about is like talking to people. So the first chapter was going to be about listening to people, and then the second chapter was about how do you convert that language into types, and then then it was going to be how do you program with it, how do you actually do an implementation based on those types. So it kind of followed naturally. So the outline, when you actually write the book, things change. Nothing, as soon as you, just like programming, you have your design and things change when you start implementing it. So, but I think it's just like software, you start with the kind of big picture design, and then when you try, then so that's the design part, and then you have the implementation part. So it's always good to think about the big picture, I think, for an academic, for a technical book, for a novel, maybe not, but for a technical book, I do think it's good to get an outline going. And then when I'm implementing the chapters by writing them, then yeah, things change, and I have to kind of revisit the outline and tweak things a bit. But I think it pretty much followed the outline, because I wanted to have this whole thing of, talking to people, and then designing, and then implementing, and then the last bit was about how to evolve the design, and then how to talk to databases and all this stuff. So I don't think I changed it that much overall between my original outline and but I think it's good. Again, it forces you to think when you're doing an outline. Yeah, it did help that I talked about it a lot, so if I tried to write this book at the very beginning, I don't think I would have done a good job, because I didn't really understand a lot of the stuff. But after I've been doing it for like 5 years, then it's like, yeah, I think I know what the important things to say are, and how to explain it to people. Does that help? Yeah.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, good. Right. Okay. So yeah, just to finish up then, to the future. So that's where I am right now. So I have kind of semi-retired. Have you noticed I haven't updated my blog for a long time, and that's just me being lazy? Actually, it's not. I do want to update it. I just been lazy. So I do have a couple more books in the pipeline. Again, I'm being lazy, and I need to work on them, and I'm just, I should. But one's going to be on functional programming. Basically, all the other stuff, other than the main, all the stuff with well-oriented programming and all the functional design patterns and stuff, I want to put that in a book. So that is something I want to do. And I also want to do a book on design, software design and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. Now, in terms of my personal life, what I did is I moved. I used to have a very high stress job, and I just moved to a quiet place, and I really wanted to get a lot of stress out of my, and I don't know if it applies to some of you, but I was actually getting very burned out with various jobs I had. And a lot of it was to do with just being working long hours, and just being stressed all the time. So I deliberately tried to de-stress my life, and I took a pay cut. So I got a lot less money. If I was living in San Francisco, working for a big company, I could probably get a lot more money, but I don't want to do that. It's not about the money. It's about having less stress in my life. So I moved to a quiet place, and luckily I can work and train remotely now, thanks to COVID. It used to be that people would not want you to do anything remotely. You had to go, I used to have to travel somewhere to do a training, but now it's all remote. So that's good. So that COVID really helped me personally in terms of opening up people, allowing me to work remotely. It's fantastic. So yeah, basically, if you find that you're stressed out a lot and you have a very stressful job, consider taking a less stressful job. It might be that the job is making you unhappy. So it's not all about the money. So it depends on, if you're young, you can probably take it, but when you get a bit older, it's not worth it. So sometimes it's worth having a kind of boring job, which is less stressful, like just a 9-to-5 job that you can just leave it behind. So I mean, I remember someone saying that working at a big corporate company can actually be more fun than working at a high energy startup, just because things are more relaxed, things are not such in a hurry. The managers tend to be better. They actually tend to be more mature, and you tend to have more perks. You have better, better perks and stuff, healthcare and all that stuff. So anyway, so that's something I can recommend highly, and I'm definitely a lot less stressed out now. So that's very good. And then in terms of F#, yeah, there's a lot of things. I think F# is fantastic, and it's a real shame that it hasn't really taken off. There's a great post by Eric Sank, I think, saying that one of the problems with F# is that C# is too good, and that C#, if you're a C# programmer, you're not desperate for something like F#, right? Because C# is pretty good already. So I would like to see F# actually focus on Python people, because it's already got the indenting is already there, the very similar philosophy of how to keep things simple, keep things not a lot of extra fluff. You don't. Python never really had that object-oriented baggage that C# has. I used Python when it was version 1.4 or something, so it didn't even have classes then. It had no object-oriented stuff at all. It's just a very simple language, very nice. So, so yeah, I think going to F# as a scripting language, like Python or JavaScript, I think might be more successful than going after C#. And if there were even things like having libraries which were literally the Python libraries available as C# as in F#. So if I'm a Python person, I can literally come to F# and I can just use the string libraries that I already know, use the collection classes that I already know, all that stuff. I don't know. It's just a thought. And the same thing with JavaScript. I mean, I do think F# is better than TypeScript. So, and again, if the tooling is there to make it really easy to use, I mean, Fable is fantastic. And again, it really, I don't know. It's just it's a tough thing. But a part of this, for this to work, I think we need to get rid of NuGet and replace it with a source code library. So a long time ago, I was using Perl, and Perl has a thing called CPAN, and it's a source code library. And it's a really nice. It was one of the fantastic things about Perl. It had this fantastic library, and I don't like I actually am very anti these distributed libraries where you register like npm. Terrible way of doing source code libraries. So my philosophy would be to have everything in one place, like a GitHub repo. So I've actually I've designed it in my head, and if someone wants to implement it for me, I'll be quite happy to tell you my design. But basically, put everything in a GitHub repo, and people just submit, and when you just download it, and the whole thing's offline, and you don't have to worry about authentication and all these things you have with npm. The whole left pad stuff that couldn't happen anyway. I have a whole thing about that, but definitely having switching to a more source language style, because that compared to Python, F# is fantastic. All the things that all the problems with Python, F# fixes. So that's what I would focus on if I was in charge of F#. So anyway, so that's that's the
question.
Yes. Yeah.
Hello. I thought about these things too. So from my point of view, it would be if we have something like F#, but more focused on on structural typing and not on nominal types, which would be probably come more close to the ideas of a dynamic language, but still statically typed. So I already have implemented a small language without a parser, but just the AST and a solver that basically looks like F# or is something like F#, a little bit reduced, but focusing on structural typing. So is it what you think?
Well, I mean, there's two ways. One is to have F# focus on Python just by making life easier, having a migration path for Python people, which there isn't. It's not very obvious right now how to do that. But yeah, having another language which sort of compiles to F# that gets to use the F# optimizer and the F#, behind the scenes, but it has a different syntax on the front, would be very interesting. And it could use the def keyword, like Python, and it could look like Python, just like TypeScript, just like languages look like something. I don't know. It'd be interesting to try that. I mean, Reason ML tried that with JavaScript, where they take OCaml and they had a kind of JavaScript syntax in front of OCaml. Yeah, it didn't work very well. So, but I mean, I do think Python is ripe for something like that. Yeah, and if it has the same syntax, I mean, the thing about Python, there's a lot of cool things that Python does, like passing in, like the keyword dictionary parameters that they pass, the double star parameters, all that stuff that obviously it's hard to do with a statically typed language, but I think you could do it by doing kind of anonymous records and stuff. And I think there's things you could do. It'd be very cool. I would definitely support something like that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, well, so sometimes when I do I do a lot of TypeScript in my daily paid work, let me say, and really it feels really cool. Like you say, okay, I mean, names for types are really just like annotations, but under the hood, if the structure matches, it's really cool.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, that's basically.
Yeah, I think you'd have to use structural typing if you really want to do be compatible with Python. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I think if I don't know, I think just like TypeScript has tried to be backward, literally compatible with JavaScript, it'd be interesting to have. I think that's just where it going with the grain. I mean, the problem is that at some point you do actually have to switch your way of thinking. If you're a Python programmer and and all you want is static typing, that's something. But if you really want to get the benefit of like discriminated unions and partial application and stuff, you'd have to at some point you have to switch out of your comfort zone and learn a new way of thinking about programming. So it might not work, just like with Reason ML not really attracting JavaScript programmers, because it's just that they have to really think in a different way. So it might not be that it works, but it might be. You could probably get a certain set of Python people if you made it easier. There's not a lot of, for example, there's no blog post on how to convert Python to F#. There's lots of blogs on C# to F#, but not that kind of thing. And I was going to write something like that. I still might do that, but I think it'd be interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think at the beginning of your story is like the marketing campaign would make something really go to the masses, which is if you do a Java like marketing campaign, then yes, you will hit that market. If not, it will be just reduced to curious people that just want to try something different.
It's hard. I mean, if you think of the big languages, C#, Java, Go, and Rust, I would say, and they all have big companies now. I mean, Rust has Firefox behind it, so it's not exactly the same, but they definitely have a lot of support. There's the very few. I mean, Python was a one-person thing, and Ruby was a one-person thing. And actually Python, is still going very strong. But yeah, it's very hard to kind of introduce a new programming language that kind of gets a lot of attention. Yeah, I agree. It's a tough one.
Right. I think Jack has a question.
Yeah, I had a question. Are there any exciting new technologies or techniques? Because I'm sure when you discover functional programming, you're like, wow, this is amazing. Are there any things recently that you've discovered or subdomains within functional programming that you'd like to highlight? You're like, hey guys, this is really cool. This is kind of a newer thing.
No, I think I'm interested in the whole effect systems thing. I mean, I like most people, monads are really annoying, and it's interesting to see that people are getting fed up with them and they're trying to other things. Like Scala 3 just has this thing called a direct effects, and OCaml has something similar, and I wouldn't be surprised if Don could come up with something for F# that something similar. So that would be interesting. Definitely getting away from the whole monads I think it's a bit of a dead end actually, but that's the trendy thing right now. But that might, in 10 years, it might be that monads are passe. But yeah, to be honest, I think programming languages, there's not a lot. I'm trying to think of anything interesting. The whole thing, Rust is very
maybe that's a good
interesting.
problem. Maybe that's a good problem
Yeah.
where we can't think of anything because that's
Yeah,
kind of.
I think they're stabilized in terms of, there's a couple of things. Rust with the I think the Rust has done very well with the memory management, and with the borrow checker, linear things like linear types and some of this stuff are going to become more popular. I've tried playing around with Idris with the dependent types. I can't see that really taking off, because basically you're programming in the type system, and if you're going to program in the type system, you might as well just program in the language. So I'm not sure, I think the programming languages really hit a plateau, but I think there's a room for tooling, and there's a room for libraries, and there's room for other things, and just design. I mean, and one of the things I should have put on my takeaway is that the programming languages are not what makes successful programs. Like if you look at Facebook, it's written in PHP. Amazon was written in Perl. There aren't any billion-dollar companies using Haskell, and if the programming language itself is irrelevant to the success of the business. And what makes a successful business is whether you listen to the customers, and whether you implement on, the things you want to do. Now, I mean, it's nice as a programmer, it's nice to use a nice language, but in terms of, a language kind of solving problems that, the languages are good enough now to do pretty much anything. And we'll see if that whole AI thing can help with that. I'm not convinced about AI either, because I just think it's just displacing, like I say, I think the fundamental problem is not writing code. The fundamental problem is understanding what you're supposed to write. What do you need to do? And so writing the specification, now the AI can't write the spec. The AI can implement the spec that you write, but figuring out what the spec to write is, that is what programming is in my book. It's not the technical thing of putting a for loop down. It's like understanding what are the problem and what's the best way to solve the problem. And as far as I know, the AIs won't be able to do. They can help you write code faster. That might well be true, but they're not going to replace thinking, I don't think.
Which is good for, that's like when people get terrified of it. I have a very similar opinion. One quick question: is your Twitter handle the picture? Is that the Santa from Miracle on 34th Street?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I was going crazy because like I watched way too many old movies because like it was mandated by my mom. But I saw that and I was like, I recognize that guy from somewhere.
The reason is because I showed up somewhere with a really big beard, and someone said you look just like Santa. And it's like, okay, so I'll make my profile picture Santa.
That's hilarious.
That's very cool.
So that's it. Anyway, I just want to say that's it. But yeah, we're happy to stop there. But I'm happy to be here for more questions. If I don't know how long you want to go on for, but I'm happy to stay here and answer any questions you like.
Yeah, so let's wrap up the session, and then we can stay on the Zoom call for a bit, and then answer the question.
So anyway, so thank you very much, everyone. Then thanks for listening to me ramble about all this stuff. And
it was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. It was really enlightening. So let me take back the screen for a sec, and then I can finish this session. So should be this. So yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in for this for our 50th session anniversary. It's been a journey, and thanks also Scott for being with us today. So just to remind a little bit, who is Amplifying F#? So Amplifying F# is an initiative to encourage open source collaboration and to try to make a difference in the F# ecosystem. So if you are in the F# ecosystem or want to learn more about F#, you can go to our website, amplifyingf#.io, and on here you have initiatives like F# Essentials. And as you can see here, we have a full course aimed to for anyone actually that has some programming knowledge, that they can learn about how to install F#, what the tools you need, and core types, functional programming, concept in general, pattern matching, and all of this. So yeah, check this out, and we have all of the videos attached to the session. And this also, was Ronald was also part of this, who's in the Zoom call. So thank you, Ronald. And Ian Russell as well was part of this. So yeah, we just finished this on this Wednesday. So this is all over now. And if you want to see more of the sessions that we had, more of the rest of the 50 sessions, so you can go to our sessions tab, and you will see here a lot of sessions that we had from different range of topics, like fixing errors, fixing some issues in the compiler, working on tooling for F#, on Rider, on Visual Studio, on Ionide. We had a lot of content that you can check if you want to know how to contribute to a open source library, and all of that will give you your starting point, so you can finish your contribution. So yeah, check this out. And the last one is that we all understand that being an open source maintainer, it's hard. Sometimes you just going to quit and move on, and we want to also be here for you, just to help you find your project a new destination, a new place, so you just don't abandon a open source F# open source library. So if you have any problem with the open source and you want to know how can we help you to do this, to check our initiative, contact us. You can see here our handlers and yeah. And the last bit, which is also important, is that we created this year a open collective initiative where we want to try to get some funding and really make a difference, like paying our Zoom subscriptions, maybe creating more initiatives like F# Essentials, like maybe having a travel expenses cover some travel expenses to talk in maybe in the US or in Norway or any other country you want us, and also to maybe get some merchandising. We have a different goal, different tiers here, so check our website and you can see exactly what we could do if we had more funding. So yeah, thank you our current sponsors that we are really thankful for this. We didn't even expect this much support. So yeah, thank you very much. And with this, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right.